Hi YouTube, welcome back to Wtf Rc Cars. So we're going to crack on with the build of the Egress Black Edition and see how far we can get with it. It's already looking a bit more car shaped, but let's bring you in for a close-up look and we'll carry on. Right, so continuing on with build. I'm going to try and work out where everything goes. So we're going to start off with that. We're going to want a little bit of oil, and we've got a smaller bearing. I'll put a little bit on that as well. So we're going to sit the bearing in. I'm going to be building this with the torque splitter instead of a locked diff. So we want the bearing fitted, then we've got these two little shims. Just got to wiggle these on. Then we should be able to sit that in place. Then we got another of these little E-clips. So try and get that on without it firing off. So once we've got that in place, we then need to put the one-way bearing on, and it says make sure that surface is facing the front. Then we're going to stick this over the end of it. Once we've got that in place, we're finishing up with a bearing on that side. Then we need the little brass collar, so that should go on there. And then it says we need to finish it off with a tiny little black O-ring, so we need to get that fitted. So we should be able to work that little O-ring over, and then it should sit down just in the little recess. So once we've got all that in place, we now need to move it across to the chassis. We've got a drive shaft, and it pretty much looks like this just sits in. So we have it facing upwards, and we get his drive shaft, get it lined up on the rear pulley. Then we should be able to drop that in place with his little bearing. Looks like it's turners, that's where it all sits. Then we need to set our mesh. So just looking at where that gear sits, and it looks like with the 30mm measurement it's absolutely bang on. So I like to leave just a little bit of play, so I'm going to tighten it up at that. And then just going to spin it round and tighten the bottom screw up. Because we don't want his motor moving anywhere. Then it's turners, we need a little bit of grease on the gear. And I think this is the first Tamiya RC that I can ever remember having that it tells us to actually grease the spur gear. I don't think I can ever remember greasing a spur gear on a Tamiya, but that should be plenty. So that should be what you end up with. Got the spur gear in place, the bearings, and it will work as a one-way. So let's carry on with build, see what else we need. Right, so let's see how this lot goes together. I think the first thing I'd do is get these tiny little grub screws in place, because you definitely don't want them going missing. So if we just put them into these bits, and just drop them in by a few turns. Then we're going to start with the sway bar. So I believe this should go through the hole from the back, so they sit in that kind of position with the two little lugs facing forward. So that's got them on. Then we're going to have to clip these on. So we'll want one of them on each side. So once we've got them in, we're then going to have to position these on the sway bar. But it doesn't give us any measurements, so I'm just going to push them all the way down for the time being and just nip them up a little. But it does tell you to have the grub screw facing upwards. So I'll just nip them up gently for the time being. Then we're going to be positioning these. It looks like they should drop underneath and these should come over the top. So it's going to fit like that. So sway bar to the bottom and them on the top as caps. Then we're going to position that over the top of it. And we're going to be dropping one of these screws through either one. And once we get these in, it should stop it all moving around everywhere. Then on the back of these, we're going to fix the tiny little lock nuts. Just get them started to hold it into position. Then finally we're going to drop a screw from the top. That should line us up. And then we're going to want this screwing into the bottom. And you basically want this straight across the chassis, the tiny little hole in it. So we've got that tightened up. And we just need to tighten these two. So that's what you want it to look like when you're finished. We've got the brackets on the bottom, this bit with the hole facing straight across, and you've got your little bits on the end for your sway bar. So let's see what we're on to next. Right, so we've got a chassis now. Looks like we're going to be mounting this over the chassis, and where you're looking for it to line up is the top of the metal mounts on the back, these three and these four holes. So on the front we're going to be putting 4 of the tapered head screws. And these are going in the 4 rear holes. And all of a sudden this chassis is looking a whole lot stronger. And I must admit, these screws, these are the ones that are going into the aluminium support, so these are your machine thread screws. but the screws that come in this kit definitely seem far higher quality than the screws that come in the normal Tamiya kit. They definitely seem a lot stronger. So we'll get these tightened down. Right, there we have it. And that's took a lot of flex out of the chassis. That is definitely a lot stronger as soon as you get that top deck put on. But let's see what else we need. First off, we've got us bearings, and I've already put a bit of oil in these. Then we've got us little bar that goes through the middle of them, and I believe that sits in that way. So once we've got that in, I've already got quite a bit of grease in here, but I'm just going to drop a few little bits on. So we've got plenty of grease in there. Then we're going to need to put this little thing into top, and again on this one it says leave the eyelet facing straight across. That seems to tighten up pretty well, so the hole wants to go straight across. Then we're going to have to drop this into place, and it says make sure that the rear sits over the motor plate. So let's see if we can get that into position. That looks like it's going in. Yep, that clips down really solid. So once we've got that clip down, the far corner is the one where you're going to put the tapered screw with the coarse threads. And then as 3 other holes, these are going to go down into the metal tubes. So we get all 3 of these in. Right, so it looks like we've got that all completed, all closed up. So let's see what else we've got. Right, so looks like this is the position we're going to want everything in. So first off, we're going to get a pair of these little ball joints, and you're going to want to screw one of these into the end of each arm, and the arms are labelled R and L. So I'll get these screwed into each one. So once we've got these 2 on, next we're going to take a long screw, and that's going to need to go through from the rear. So you've got a tiny little hole in them. So I'll get these screwed in on them both. Right, so once we've got them in, and this is the first time I've seen it mentioned, it's telling us to put a drop of thread lock on the end of each one of those. So we get a bit of thread lock on them. So once we get this thread lock on, we're going to get the tiny little shims, and then we can screw these in place. That should stop them falling out on us. So that's got us little ball joints in place, and then we just need to pop these in. And it does say they fit from the top, but let's see if we can get them in. And they go in a lot easier than what I were imagining. So that's got everything in position. Let's see what else we've got. Alright, one thing I forgot to put on, but luckily, because we've fitted the torque splitter, you can pop the little O-ring off, then slide the brass ring back, but we're meant to have a little bit of anti-wear grease on the end of this prop shaft. So I'm just going to put a bunch of anti-wear grease on there. Now I'm not sure if you fit the locker shaft if you've got the same option as being able to slide this off. Yeah, so luckily, because I fitted the torque splitter, we can just pop the O-ring off and the little brass ring, and it does let you pop the drive shaft out, so we can get us anti-wear grease in. But let's carry on. Right, so here we go. So if we're looking at the left hand side, we want one of these. Then looks like we're going to have to put a spacer on the bottom. So that's going to go on the bottom of it, and then one of them's going to go on top. So kind of looks like that is the only way to do it. So then we're going to need to get this screw all the way in. So once we've got that all the way down, then you're going to want to cap it with one of them little ball joints. So basically that is the position we want to be in on both sides. So we got the ball joint, then the top hat with the smooth bit to your carbon, your ball joint, then the cone and the longest screw all the way through. So I'll get the other side put on and see what else we need. Right, so that's both sides on. So we've got them in place. Now let's try and work out where the rest of these screws go, because we've got a whole load of bits left. It looks like the sway bar is going to line up kind of in that position. So looks like we got something right. So then your reinforcement plates go on and line up with the little holes. And I believe the shortest screw goes to the front. So we want a shortest screw coming up from bottom, then as plate, then we need that with the flattest part at the bottom. So that's going to go in that sort of position. Then we've got to get one of those little nuts on. So we need strengthening plate, then that with the flattest bit at the bottom, and then a nut on it. Then we got to get a suspension fitted. If we drop as longest screw in, then as little top hat, and try and line that up, then drop the spacer on, and we should just be able to drop the screw down slightly and get it in place. Now that's a lot easier than doing it back. So we just need to tighten these two up, so you get a better idea of how the suspension actually works on this and where the sway bar is going to go. But they do go on with a bit of a squeeze front pliers. So on the other side, we're going to go strengthening plate first, then the smallest of the screws, then we're going to loosely fasten that on. Just get the get the nut just started on it, give you a little bit of wiggle room. Then we're going to want a screw in front bottom. Then we can drop our top hat in place. And we're going to want to get the suspension ball lined up. And we should just have enough room to get the washer on. Spin that round. And then get that nut tightened down. Then lastly, and there we go, that is our rear suspension built. So I think the last thing we've got to put in place on here, we've got the longer of the output shafts, and we've got one little sponge to pop down into each one of these. So just make sure that's set down into the bottom of it, and then we should be able to pop these into place, and basically they should slide into diff, and then we can make sure the drivetrain works and the diff works. So I think we should call it a day at that for the moment. Of course, my fingers are hurting. I've still got 12-hour shifts to do, and I'm quite happy with progress we've made on it. And if I push on with it, I'm just going to start making some mistakes. So let's wrap this one up. So there we go. We now have the top deck drive shafts as drivetrains pretty much done. We've got his rear sway bar and his rear suspension. And yeah, it's definitely looking a really nice RC. I'm really surprised at how strong that frame is. It definitely feels rigid. But yeah, really impressed with it so far. Everything feels solid, everything's gone together nice. The only really awkward parts are these little bits at back, but you can work them in, you can get them in there. These bits look more complicated, but they're actually way easier. If you're enjoying this video as much as I'm enjoying doing the build, don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, share to friends and family, and you've been watching Wtf Rc Cars. Catch you guys again in the next one.